Hi everybody, this is Talina from Mom and Pop Wine Shop. Welcome to our third winemaker interview that we're doing in association with our newly launched wine club. Today we're going to be meeting with Bree and Chad Stock, who are our featured winemakers along with Domaine Meuse of the Loire Valley. And I'm going to invite Bree and Chad to join us here. Just give me a moment. Here they are. It looks like Constant Crush needs the latest version of Instagram to go live, so I'm not sure if this is going to work out or not. But in any case, we are excited to feature their wine, which comes from Eola Springs Vineyard, which is a beautiful vineyard in Eola Amity Hills that was planted in 1972. And the wine that we're featuring has some Pinot Gris and some early Muscat that is own rooted and it's dry farmed, and they made a beautiful wine from that. I'm going to grab the bottle and show it to you and try to figure out how we're going to conduct this interview if they're not able to join. Right back. This is the label that we're featuring this month. Limited edition is their label. Let's see here. The other wine that I should have already gotten out of my bag, as you can see, I'm not terribly great at this, is Goldeneye from Domaine Meuse. And it features a couple of grapes, one of which I'm just learning to pronounce, called Loin d'Olay. The other is Grüner Veltliner. So we have 4 different semi-aromatic white varieties in our club this month. And you can see there's some nice skin contact, or some color that was extracted from direct press Pinot Gris that was ripened on the vine, picked direct press whole cluster, and along with the early Muscat, they were co-fermented. And I was going to ask Bree and Chad about the production on the wine so that we could understand sort of how this wine happened from the grapes to the bottle. And I'm very excited to talk to my first master of wine ever, as far as I know, I think anyway, who is Bree. So if you can pause for a second, I'm going to see what I can do to find a way to connect with them. Let's see here. Maybe, Bree and Chad, there's a way for you to join under a different Instagram account if I'm not able to pick you up on your Constant Crush account. Is there one that you could use from Craft Wine Co. or another one that would allow us to run this version so that we can talk live? In the meantime, if you're just joining us, we're hoping to connect with Bree and Chad. There we go. I think we're just waiting for them to join. It's always rocky. I've been reflecting on learning new things in this process, I think, as a lot of us have been during the pandemic. There they are.
Hi.
Hi. Every single one of these has had a little rocky start. So there we go. Are you able to hear me? What's that? Are you able to hear me clearly? I'm getting a kind of a rocky signal. Got it. It's a little spotty right now. Yeah, it might. Looks like maybe we lost you for a second. So if you're just joining us, we're having a little bit of technological difficulty connecting with Bree and Chad because, of course, they're in wine country, and there's a lot of parts of the area where Wi-Fi is spotty, as we know. And I was saying that I was reflecting on learning new things and how art is kind of a process and not just a result. And even though I might not necessarily consider Instagram live an art, learning new things takes a lot of patience and takes time to like swallow your ego a little bit. I'm not really sure who the request is coming from to be in the live video here. Perhaps it's another way to connect with Bree and Chad. In any case, let's just see here. See if I can. No, I don't think. In any case, it looks like we may have to give this another shot at another time. I apologize that we're having these technical issues because it's a really exciting wine club this month, but maybe we can reschedule so that everybody gets a lot out of this. Regretfully, I think that's probably the best tack to take. Thank you for all of you who joined in, and I appreciate it. It's always rocky when something like this happens. So I'm going to bid you adieu from now. If you've already gotten up, hold on a second. Here we go. Perhaps we have a better internet connection this time before I call it quits. Thanks for all your patience for folks who are sitting. There we go.
Is this any better? We're around the property.
That's much better.
Okay, no, we should be definitely good to go now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are you comfortable? It looks like you're outside.
We are now outside, yeah.
Okay, well, we're all improvising a little bit in this pandemic world these days, and so normally we have you in the shop to speak to people directly, but since we can't do that, this is the next best thing. So thank you for your persistence and your creativity and going outside.
Of course, sorry for the rough start. We're thrilled to be here, and
that's okay.
For the last few minutes in the beginning.
Yeah. Why don't you two just give our listeners a quick overview of kind of how you started out in wine? I mean, a lot of us look at your resumes and kind of go, what? How do you start? How do you achieve this level of academic accomplishment as a master of wine and launching consulting? And, it's quite a journey. So give us a little overview, if you will.
You go first.
Well, I guess this is a cautionary tale for those of you who are wine fans or into wine, because I really just started, in restaurants, working as a server, and I was studying acting, and I was just really falling in love with the wine list that I had in front of me, and starting to learn producer stories and taste different wines from all around the world, and from that I just continued down the rabbit hole of learning. And so did some sommelier courses, and then got into importing and into teaching wine. And of course, when you're importing and you're selling wine and repping wine, then I was, interested in doing harvest, and it just slowly unraveled the the whole rabbit hole of the wine industry. And I just didn't stop. And so the more that I wanted, the more that I learned, the more I knew I didn't know, and the more I knew I wanted to know. And so I just continued following the path, and it brought me back to the Pacific Northwest.
How did you two connect?
So I was here in 2014 for Pinot Camp. I was living in Melbourne in Australia, and selling wine and teaching for the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. And was sent over here for Pinot Camp, and then I was also writing some articles for some wine magazines, and I was, in this fairly small region, and not incredibly heard of at the time, or not incredibly sold around the world, because there's such small production from Oregon. And so I was, I'd been in Pinot Camp for a week, and I'd been sent around to different producers, and I was trying to write a story about, this valley and this place. And I saw a lot of Pinot Noir, and I just kept saying, okay, so what else is there around? What else is happening? And so now mutual friends of ours, they said, oh, you got to go and meet Chad Stock. And so I got sent to Chad, and that was kind of how we first met.
Very cool. And so tell our viewers about your many I feel like you have your fingers in all sorts of things now. It's fantastic.
There's a lot going on because there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And fortunately, there's a small army of us now. And, you obviously carry many wines in your shop as they're available from other small grape producers who are making this region more complex and interesting and delicious. So I discovered wine in college. I wanted to study something with food sciences. I was really obsessed basically with food, but I couldn't find a career in food that matched kind of like my lifestyle and the way I wanted to live. Mm-hmm. So when I discovered wine and I discovered brewing, I didn't even know that was something you could study in college. I thought that was kind of generational farming, families, and kind of learning through apprenticeship. And I found out that there were actually colleges that offered enology as a degree. And I met with a bunch of winemakers and brewers, and I looked at what their work was like. I realized that wine was more interesting for me than beer, because beer was just, at the time, very recipe driven. And I thought that would be maybe not, all that interesting forever. So I decided to get into wine. And when I enrolled in college, I switched majors. I was studying business at the time, here in Oregon, actually. And I went back to California, where I'm from, and I got a degree in enology. And as soon as I was done, I did an apprenticeship in Napa Valley, just because it was convenient, and I just wanted to check it out. But I wanted to get back to Oregon as fast as I could. And so in 2007, I officially moved to Oregon, and I've been here ever since, making wine, except for 1 year. I worked and lived in Australia about 12 years ago. And so this has been my home. This has been really, my career essentially is the Willamette Valley. And then I started Minimus, which was my first personal project in 2010. And that allowed me to start working with fruit from the Washington border, basically the Columbia Gorge, all the way down to Ashland. So I was exploring basically every wine region in Oregon and really learning all of the kind of intricate differences and the climates and the grape varieties and people that were doing things in the different areas, and built a really great network. And just met a lot of people and made a lot of friends. And in 2018, I had to end the Minimus project for personal reasons. Bree and I wanted to start our own thing, and so I left, and we started Constant Crush. And when I left that project, I had a lot of people reaching out to me, because now we're starting to actually see the early signs of like real significant change, where a lot more of the industry is now starting to respect our work and want to ask questions. And so there's a lot of consulting that can happen. And so I can help a lot more people through consulting to also help perpetuate this change that I believe many people want to see in the Willamette Valley. And so that allowed me to basically be able to focus on a lot more things, which is why you see my fingers in so many and so many things.
And this is a pretty exciting region, as far as wine regions, globally go. There's so many family traditional, hand-me-down projects, through families and estates that sort of have to follow in tradition. And Oregon is kind of unique in that you can start with a small project and build, and it's still affordable, and it's really, quite a unique place still in the world for that. So that was really, you know, a draw card for me as well, having the cool climate that where things were still, you know, possible to make your own, you know, project really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something that you said struck me, Chad. It was about building those relationships, and I think something that the wine industry does really well is to create a romance around wine. But what a lot of people don't understand is what's going on all the time behind the scenes, and how wine gets made and where it starts. You know, we have this picture of some of the early practitioners, you know, in the valley they have the estate, this is their vineyards, this is the place where they make their wine right on site, and that's what they do. And on that end of the continuum, and then all the way over to wine that really doesn't have a sense behind it, that's barrels and tanks that are sold to people to put labels on for grocery stores, you know, all over the place, and then kind of everything in between. And so when you said, you know, there's change that a lot of people want to see in the valley, I think of that piece of the business a lot as being very exciting, a place where there's all these possibilities between estate wine and working closely with growers to create something that you're proud of and to change the conversation. So how do you see like the next 10 years or so of Oregon wine, and what is the change that people are talking about in your you know, world of the business?
It's getting much more social and less wine and farming technical.
Mm-hmm.
So we're addressing issues like labor shortages, diversity and equity and inclusiveness. We're trying to figure out how to talk about and change the sort of colonialism of wine, you know, white privilege and wealth. And, you know, there's a lot of conversations going on essentially. So, you know, we're talking about the culture and the industry probably more often than we are actually talking about how we're making a wine or farming.
I see.
So that would be the bulk of the conversation. And then when it comes between wine and farming, I'd say for most of our friends, the conversations are probably slightly more about wine, to be honest. And what I mean by that is the farming conversation is fairly consistent no matter what grape variety or what kind of wine you're trying to make. You know, farming is more of this discussion of regeneration, you know, organics, biodynamics. So because we're starting to get so much more diverse in the grape varieties that we're growing and how many wine styles we can produce, I feel like there's a lot, and also a lot of the producers who seem to be getting on board with this change from that angle are younger winemakers, not necessarily in age, but in experience. And so there's a lot of sort of, you know, technical discussions about how long are you doing skin contact on your orange wine, and how, you know, how are you achieving your carbonation, your pet nat bottling, and things like that. And so I feel like there's actually quite a bit of winemaking conversation that's happening because it's, most of us are still in a kind of a discovery mode of how to create these wine styles here in the Willamette Valley.
And they're not the traditional wine styles either that you would normally, you know, find in traditional regions, especially regions that have, I guess, previously referred to themselves as being more old world in style, and sort of, you know, setting themselves up against that colonial landscape of who's dictating the quality varieties and the style of quality product. And that seems to be unraveling pretty quickly, which is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the internet is brilliant for that, and this medium, you know, really brings people into a conversation for understanding how things are made and why they taste the way they do. And you know, and it lets producers speak directly to an audience, whereas there used to be tastemakers completely in control of that process, filtering out what the winemakers were doing and selling that to customers, you know, which sometimes was based on just sheer expediency. So I think being able to connect people more directly. So, you know, in that regard, that's what we're trying to do here. So And I think in breaking tradition, you know, it's a nice segue into talking about the evolution of Pinot Gris in the Willamette Valley, from where many people still think of it to where it's going, and that draws in farming and I think dovetails nicely with the discussion of this wine. So if you would like to tell us a little bit more about what makes this special, I would really appreciate that.
Oh, there's a couple of things that make that wine kind of special. I guess the first is starting with the place and the vine age for those particular varieties. So they're 40-plus-year-old own-rooted Pinot Gris and early Muscat vines. A lot of the early Muscat has been torn out because it didn't have any value in the marketplace. And there's now a small group of us who are, you know,
Paying a premium to keep it alive.
yeah, paying a premium to keep it alive. Exactly. So that's one interesting conversation that's happening there. And then this vineyard also is one of the farmers that we work with who are willing to be experimental enough to plant different grape varieties. Sorry.
Sure, that's okay.
To plant, you know, alternative grape varieties and really experiment with what's coming down or what's the potential of this place is.
Yeah.
And we all know that, you know, climate change is happening and the environment's getting warmer here. And so we have, you know, Cabernet Franc and Grenache and Chenin Blanc and Menthea and Trousseau and Gamay all planted now at this site, which was traditionally only just Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris and a bit of Muscat and a little bit of Chardonnay. Which also kind of dovetails into the next conversation, which is, you know, these two grape varieties that we were, you know, sourcing for this wine. We initially sort of thought that we would make a more, you know, phenolic, more serious orange wine or skin contact wine from this fruit. And you know, on the Labor Day weekend, we had these massive wildfires that, you know, started over in Silverton and in the Cascades and, you know, really blanketed the region in smoke for an extended period of time. And so we really had to, you know, assess what our fruit was and pivot in our winemaking styles. And so some of the grape varieties that we would traditionally use here in the valley were really severely impacted by the wildfire smoke. And then some of these newer varieties were not impacted. So we didn't lose quite as much fruit as, you know, we thought maybe we might have, or if we had just been relying on a single grape variety. Mm-hmm. But Pinot Gris tends to be one of those varieties that can be susceptible to wildfire smoke. So we decided that we would only do a light skin contact and not, you know, pursue the really orange component. Mm-hmm. And so
I call it orange wine light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, like great.
And we're so thrilled with it. You know, we love the wine. I mean, it's been so well received, but we did Iron Chef it, you know, game day because of the fires, and just keeping the maturation down basically helps to mitigate any potential risk of the wine having smoke flavors or smoke aromas. So we'll see what we do with it this year. We'll see what nature brings us.
Yeah. That it was kind of nice to, you know, we wouldn't have had that expression of this wine. Sure. Fires as well. So it was nice to be able to find something so, you know, beautiful and delicate still in such a, you know, scary time.
Yeah. I mean, I think something that I heard you speak about when I watched one of your lectures online at some point was, you know, just talking about how Pinot Gris, it's not a particularly high yielding variety to begin with. And so it was never terribly profitable for people to make in the style that it was made for the price point that people are willing to spend for Pinot Gris. So it was really due for a reimagining, I would think, so that we can continue to keep these vines, unless somebody someday like promotes and gets everybody to drink Vendange Tardive or something. Like, you're not gonna see too much excitement around Pinot Gris, but I think it's been really refreshing to see all of these iterations with some color and some texture, and so hopefully, and also aromatic whites in general seeing a renaissance in interest. So that's been exciting as a buyer to suddenly have more customers who are open to dry but aromatic white varieties here in Oregon.
That's great. We're thrilled that you're seeing that, because it's impossible to find aromatic white fruit right now because of the number of smaller producers that I was earlier praising. People are going after these normally not very popular varieties, and they're making great wines with them. And none of this stuff has really been planted in the last 20 some odd years, right? So it's very limited supply.
I think it's also, interesting with, the move towards drinking lower alcohols. And, I think that some of the, Pinot Gris, a red-skinned variety, has color. And so it can make these sort of lighter red, or, we don't even have a style for them, but they can be lower alcohol, but they can still have some tannins and be a little more serious than just a, white wine as well, or, or more serious than an overcropped white wine as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you're just joining, we're with Bree and Chad Stock, and we're discussing their label limited edition, their old vine Pinot Gris and Muscat, which is paired up with our Goldeneye, which I just learned is named after a video game. Really? I didn't know. My son just said, really? It's a game you're not allowed to play yet. From like way back when. The Dresner family got back to me about why they named it Goldeneye, and it's like a first-person shooter game character that that the boys like to play. And I was thinking about all of the frost damage that is trying to be avoided right now in France, and thinking maybe possibly the idea behind this wine is, as folks in Loire have experienced in 2019 too, bad frost years where they lose a lot of their yield, they seem to be developing relationships in other parts of France to be able to vinify and make up, just like you were dealing with, fires on this end.
That's actually the reason why we chose the wine. Yes, you really nailed it. We love the family that, and we're really close friends with the Dresner, with Jules Dresner and the team there. So for us, it felt like a perfect wine. And that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about is adversity and adaptation.
Yeah.
And how the more pigeonholed we are as individuals, but also as an industry, into producing expected styles from expected grapes and things like that, really limits our ability to work with Mother Nature. Because if people are more interested in about the consistency of taste, and we're more interested in consistency of quality, which could be different from vintage to vintage, there's an important conversation there to be had. And we're bold enough to just take the route of what we want to make each year and make the best version of that thing based on what we have to work with. And it's worked out really well for us. But it would be tough to imagine as a 250,000 case, winery that's, pumping wine into Safeway. People might go, they taste a wine from one vintage and then taste it the next vintage, and it's so different and they don't know what to do with it.
Sure.
Right. So this relationship that we're having now with you, you're a private, wine shop. You're tasting all the wines, so we can work together to be able to navigate those challenges and make sure that people are getting wine that they're going to love and that they understand it. and it's hard to do that on mass scale. And so it's really important for small producers and obviously small retailers and restaurants and things like that, to be able to educate and to help this, to help this happen. So
yeah, and it's more interesting. It's more fun to have something that's a surprise. I mean, it makes a lot more note writing for me, for sure. Which is sometimes why I'm a little behind and why I was scrambling frantically before this interview to get stuff taken care of. But it's worth it for sure, for sure. So,
also what you do as well, the wine packs that you put together are so unique with the artists and that is just it kind of reminds me of what the Moss family are doing with their wine as well, and they're making the connections and networks around Europe to share their artistry and share their stories, and I love all that coming together, and I thought that was such a unique and beautiful collaboration that you've put together. So thank you.
Things percolate sometimes for a while, and on one positive side, even though the pandemic has been really isolating for a lot of us, it also gives you time to really reflect and think about how you want to bring things into the world again, and time to figure these little issues out. And I don't know, it was just sort of a bolt of energy that happened in the middle of the dark winter this year. We finally pulled it all together, and seeing quite a few people that I know who are artists and musicians, just who normally rely on the restaurant industry too for their supplemental income, just all of that evaporating, and thinking about how the creative instinct that we have as humanity is like probably the most important thing to honor in all of us. So that's how it came to fruition. Just people who make stuff, they put it out there. You have to let your ego dissolve. You have to learn new things and just, open it up to the world. And my son is standing opposite me right now, writing notes on a sign saying, "I want to watch TV, please." I can't believe it. I told him not to interrupt if he could possibly stand it. So Francis, go play Legos, please. I'll be finished in a little while. You cannot watch. He's currently obsessed with Inspector Gadget, which is driving me crazy.
Oh, that was one of my favorite cartoons.
I know, but it's like one of those brainworm songs.
Yeah.
So anyway, these guys sourced some fruit from Southwest France, from Gaillac, and from friends also in Austria, I believe, for the bulk of it. The 70% of it is the Loire, I believe, and then 30 Gruner. Or maybe my brain just flipped that around. But I wonder if you have any thoughts as winemakers on what it would be like for somebody, who's usually working with Chenin to experience those two grapes.
Actually, we just had this conversation again the other day about, because we do work with Chenin, and I've worked in Austria and made Gruner a couple of times. And I think there are a lot of real similarities between those two grape varieties in that, they both are can be phenolic, and they both carry a lot of flavor in their skins. You have options with both of those grapes to make a variety of styles.
When you say phenolic, tell the good people of the world, what do you mean?
The textural bitterness and tannic note in your palate. So, when you're actually feeling that grape skin, if you're eating a bunch of grapes and you actually feel that tannin or coming through. Yeah.
Perfect.
Sorry
to interrupt.
No, it's a great question, and it's really silly because we call it tannins in red wine, but in white wines we call it phenolics because white wine isn't supposed to have tannins.
Right.
Ooh.
Who told us that? Yeah.
You're the master of wine. You tell me.
What?
You got to get in there and change things, right?
That's what you're... See, I have to untrain my brain.
Yeah, if you can't change it, who could?
Exactly. The language of wine.
So from my angle to try to answer that, my expertise is definitely more in farming and winemaking. She knows much more like global contexts and other things I don't.
Yeah.
Um, because I've worked with so many grape varieties, I've worked with over 50 grape varieties in my career and
Wow.
experimented a lot, as you probably remember the minimus experiments and things like
Yeah.
that. And I was always destroying wine and doing super inappropriate things just to try to figure out like what can I do with aligote, or like, what can I do with whatever, any Grunerveltliner, right? And so I'm fermenting
Vermentino.
on the skins and off the skins, and I'm doing botrytis, and sometimes I ferment with the stems in the barrel, and like just basically trying to figure it out like a chef. So
Yeah.
for me, winemaking, I think about it almost a little bit more like I'm cooking, and I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about where's the flavors, where are the textures, how am I going to respectfully extract kind of what I want and maybe not extract the other things I'm not looking for. All of this in a wild fermentation capacity, right?
Mhm.
And I've learned a lot, and I think that every time I work with something new, I generally keep it pretty simple the first time so that I can just see what it's like with a very rudimentary, very straightforward kind of type of winemaking. And then I start kind of pushing the boundaries from there of what I learned to try to make adjustments for things that I would like to see be different in an on the fly type situation like this wine, the Goldeneye wine. I would imagine they probably talked with their friends where they got the fruit from. I know for sure they're global. They're very global people. They drink worldwide and they travel a ton. So I think that they probably have a pretty darn good taste palette that's not based off of their house wine and only drinking their neighbors' wines.
Yeah.
And because of that, they probably were able to basically wing, because they got enough knowledge, they're basically probably able to wing it, um, and sort of comfortably be in that fringe, with
Hmm.
something not something that they normally grow, but they have a good palate and a global context for wine and have perspective. And you know what I mean? And then obviously with their respectful methods and techniques they use for their own fruit, I can't imagine how they would make a bad version of anything, you know. They're talented.
Well, and also, I mean, you think about people who have their own estate vineyards, and I think they have something like 7 hectares of Chenin Blanc, and the one thing that I notice different about new world or modern wine growing regions is that they pick and expect everything to ripen at the same time, and so they're like homogenous approach to the product and to grape growing. And I know that from other people that I've worked with, that's just not the way that as an estate you approach things. And so sometimes you'll come through and pick out grapes that aren't quite fully ripe, and I might make a sparkling wine, or that might make my base wine, or the acid profile, and then I'll let something hang with botrytis and really concentrate it and make it interesting and unique, and then something else in the same row I'll come through and harvest at a different time, and maybe make as a traditional style or as an orange wine. But there's this, and I know that we frustrate our growers and our viticulturists here, because we get constant messages from them at harvest that there's some botrytis happening in here. You better come through and pick. I think you need to pick tomorrow. And we're like, yeah, we're okay. We're just gonna let it hang for we'll check in on it in a few days or next week. And so we're definitely trying to change the conversation here and the thought process, even at the ground level.
But these are things we feel comfortable with, right? Like we know,
Yeah.
like there's a level of risk we take on our own once the fruit is harvested. We don't try to put our farming partners at risk.
Yeah.
But there are things that we are totally comfortable with that seem completely wild and dangerous, and they're basically having to go along this ride with us and kind of build a stronger stomach,
Yeah.
And we're doing well. We're doing well.
It kind of occurred to me in some ways that the original planting of vineyards that occurred in California was often this field blend, this mix of all these different dark skinned grapes. And those vines evolved over the years, and a lot of them are still standing, a lot of them are gone. But I kind of feel like, the inception of Oregon winemaking happened longer before, and then Prohibition happened. But it almost feels like we're in an era of mass experimental plantings of all sorts of different grape varieties that could eventually be more important as just a vineyard mix to give you these options, depending on whether you have, suddenly the vines awakening and then having frost, or having wildfires on the other end, and that maybe the mix of them as a whole will produce these Oregon blends that are that have their own signature, and that someday we won't, really be thinking that much about estate single block Pinot Noir anymore.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because when just you saying that, I think about, Kathy Carson and being some of the first, graduates of Davis, and this concept of modern winemaking is barely a generation old,
Right.
It's I love the possibility of those thoughts, and where these regions go, and what American wine can become more.
Yeah, it feels very, very exciting, certainly, to witness. I'm glad I'm not the one that has to take the big risks.
Well, we're happy that you're taking the risks that you are, and curious.
Yeah. Well, we're really fortunate. Our customers have been very trusting and open and curious, and I think they are generally. But wine has this, again, it has this, it has barriers. I think the more people sometimes acquire knowledge, that there's sort of a wall that springs up between them and the ultimate consumer sometimes, because there's a lot of technical jargon that gets thrown around that people are kind of afraid of asking. So anyway, I feel like we got a good overview about these two wines. Is there some stuff in your immediate future that we should know about, perhaps? I'm sure there is, given all the things that you have going on.
Oh, what do we have coming
Well,
up?
we are still growing our production. We'll probably be about 90% this year in terms of what we can do, unless we can expand further farming relationships with other people that are interested in what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And there will be some new grape varieties. We'll probably be adding about a half a dozen new wines to what we can offer, and we'll be fairly close to fully developed, I guess, at that point. So we're really excited to hit that milestone.
I'm pretty excited about some of the Spanish varieties that we have coming online. So,
Yes.
yeah, we've got, the Grenache Rosé, but we also have Mencia that we'll be bottling in June or July this year, which is the first bottling of that from the Willamette Valley. And then we've also got some Gadeo plantings that are coming, will be coming on in the next couple of years. But
and then also Luriro
and
Arinto,
yeah,
and Juan Garcia and Castelao and Braccolao.
Yeah.
I always want to say Braccolao.
No,
Braccolao. So we're experimenting with Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian. I mean, we're covering a significant area, because one of the things that is definitely true, as far as I'm convinced, we can ripen Grenache here in the Willamette Valley. And I don't mean like 1 year in 10. I mean, we can ripen it 7 or 8 years in 10. And I mean, 14% alcohol wine, not like barely ripe. And if Grenache is the new end of the season grape variety, which is this concept of what's called cold climate amelioration,
Mm-hmm.
which is if you're growing the right grape in the right region, it'll reach pinnacle ripeness right at the end of the season and not any earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so Grenache is kind of that thing now. And Grenache is a warm climate grape variety, sort of. At least we normally associate it with warmer climates, right?
Yeah.
If you think about everything else that people consider to be easier to ripen than Grenache, that list is pretty overwhelmingly long.
Yeah.
And so we have a new what do you call it? We've got a new point of reference essentially, and it's not Pinot Noir, it's Grenache. You know, the Pinot Noir conversation is really about ripening early, and the problem with that is that as the climate does warm, we will still continue to ripen Pinot Noir, of course, but we're going to start to have some of the flavor issues that are existent in a lot of California and Washington wines, where you lose the delicacy essentially of the grape variety, and
Mm-hmm.
you're either harvesting it at such extreme bricks for the flavors to get there that you have to build the wines back with acid and water and all these additives and stuff, and you're basically just trying to buy time. You know, it's going down the tubes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so for the
For
sake
folks who are wondering what he's talking about, you have to remember that the sugars in the grapes are developing when it gets hot, but the actual ripening of the plant, the skins and the stems and the seeds and so forth, sometimes lags behind. And so for those two things to match in a cool climate variety can be kind of challenging. And then you end up with wines that ferment out dry at a really high alcohol, and they lose a lot of delicacy.
Yeah, the other thing too, which you can see in some of the wines that are being made in Washington by some younger winemakers who are basically saying, okay, we're going to make, we're going to pick early and all this other stuff. That doesn't work. It doesn't work either. And the reason why is because if you're picking just on acid to retain acidity and the fruit's not ripe, it doesn't taste like much. And like you could have Mourvedre and Cabernet Franc and Pinot Noir all taste pretty similar, and it's just kind of these green sort of underripe flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of screwed if you do, screwed if you don't on both ends.
I mean, that works in champagne, right? You pick early, and then it's all process driven to bring the flavor and texture. And
so we really feel like this is, Oregon is the place on the West Coast to really have what I would hope to be at least one more full generation where we will be able to continue to make Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but we will also be able to continue to really tap into the fact that this is arguably the last temperate rainforest on the West Coast. And, we can make great wines here, and it doesn't have to be about a grape. It can be a quality conversation about a lot of grapes and a lot of styles. And I think Oregon is learning to capitalize on that just now, and we're building momentum there. And I think that that's really like the smart future for us, for our life and our contribution to that for the industry, and also for the generations that are coming up behind us, that they're going to have new knowledge and new information of great varieties and stuff, and experimentation to provide them insight into how to be in this industry for their lifetime, and knowledge to draw from.
And the rain conversation is an important one as well, because it keeps out a lot of those, bigger wine farms, and players who you need a lot of, water and flat land to be able to really bulk out and make high production wine. And, where about being, on the hillsides and still, very small production or, restrained production, because we do only have what rainfall the winter gives us. And, we're very dry throughout the summer here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really truly feel like I could probably sit here and ask you and pepper you with so many questions, and just enjoy philosophizing about what is to come. But I now have seen my son for the second time. He's bored. So it's all about business life balance, and always mama. Always mom first.
It was lovely to speak with you, and thank you so much for supporting us. And
I'm delighted that the stars finally aligned for me to put this together.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really
pairing.
beautiful.
It's a kind of a crazy pairing, but I love it.
I can't believe the weather forecast too. When we decided on doing these wines, I thought people are going to think I'm crazy for doing these in April in Oregon. And then I looked at the phone today and it's going to hit 75 next week. And I was just flabbergasted. So
Perfect timing.
I think the wine club brought it. I don't know. I'm just going to claim it. So
Run with it.
much appreciated, and thank you so much. And hopefully when things get back to some semblance of normal, people could visit you. I don't know if that's a possibility out at your facility.
Yeah.
That absolutely.
Yeah.
Have people reach out, or we can come and do something.
Yeah. Do you accept appointments currently for visitors?
We do if
we do. People can reach out through our website.
Yeah, send us an email.
We can try to coordinate schedules.
Yeah.
Great. That's fantastic. Well, it's really, really great to spend this time with you, and I hope that people had a good experience hearing from you. I'm sure they did. And I know they're going to enjoy the wine, so that goes without saying. Thank you so much, Bree and Chad, and all the best. I look forward to seeing this Grenache coming out.
About 2 weeks. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Did you hear that? Bye, people I don't know. Thank you.
Thanks.